Welcome, everybody. This is the first session for the hot seat. This is a competition between the many speakers. So, how are you?
Yeah, well, great.
Great. This is a bit louder, yeah, I think. So maybe we can upload our first speaker of the hot seat. This is Marcello Palazzi,
Thank you. Well,
one of the co-founder of B Corp. That is right.
yeah, B Corps in Europe. I started B Corps Europe. Does
Did
it
you-
work? Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
worked.
it works. Now you
Yeah.
can tweet, we can follow him on Twitter, and we can start so our first session. So just to start, can you explain the B Corp movement?
Yeah, definitely. So B Corps are a new class of companies. Can you hear? Can you hear like that? I mean, okay. So B Corps are a new class of companies that started about 12 years ago. We now have 3,000 companies in 60 countries, from Patagonia, Ben and Jerry, some of the subsidiaries of Danone, and the whole concept is we say impact and profit. So profit we know. To be in business, you have to make profit, but our paradigm is companies in the future will have to really do everything they can to achieve positive impact, to resolve the issues we know, equality, climate change, et cetera, et cetera. So this is like a vanguard group of companies in 60 countries that have said, yes, it's enough talking, we've got to do it. So you have to certify to become a B Corp. It's quite tricky. We have 75,000 users and only 3,000 actually have made it to become B Corps. And then we have a legal...
How many?
So 75,000 users that use the impact methodology, and 3,000 have become B Corps. Plus, we have a legal, we created a law in the United States, now in Italy, in Colombia. It's called the Benefit Corporation. So by law, you could also kind of change your legal statute and incorporate the same principles of positive impact in the legal statute. And other countries like Argentina, Taiwan, Portugal are also discussing this in parliament. So it's certification and the law, as well as, of course, the community and learning from each other. So like Danone, one of the first things they did, they wanted to learn from Patagonia, so they invited the CEO of Patagonia to join the advisory board. So it's a really movement for change for the real kind of committed companies.
And can you tell us more about B Corporation in Europe? What do you see there, and how do you feel the commitment of big companies?
So Europe, I started in Europe 5 years ago. We now have about 600 B Corps in Europe. It started like in the US or like in South America with first family businesses, smaller companies. Ben and Jerry, Method, Ecovare, and gradually it's moved to more mainstream. So now in Europe we have 8 subsidiaries of Unilever, B Corps. There are several Danone subsidiaries of B Corp. We started a conversation with Philips, with DSM, with Engie, with Enel. So a lot of the big companies, IKEA as well, they are under pressure. The big companies in a way are the ones where the
But
change...
I think it's worldwide, a worldwide pressure with consumers, no? Especially you feel that in Europe.
So, I mean, I'm European, but I also worked and live in the US and in other countries. At the moment, as of today, the US is under pretty strange government. So the bigger companies, and I can give you the data, 15 multinationals from Europe have actually asked in various stages to join the B Corp movement, and there's only 1 or 2 in the United States. So at the moment, there is much more pressure for transformation in Europe than anywhere else in the world. There is pressure in South America, but South America doesn't have so many multinationals. So, in fact, most of the multinationals in the world are either, Europe, US, and of course some now in China and Japan. But I say Europe is where most of the energy now is. Our governments are more open about it. The EU is much more open about this change, much more than, the rest of the world. So. As of today, there is more urgency understood in Europe, and I think France is taking a lot of an example in this. French capitalism, before neoliberalism, French capitalism was already much more social and much more integrated, balanced. So we are this is the revenge of Europeans in a way. I say this as a friend of America, but this is the revenge of Europeans about the kind of model of capitalism which we know more in Europe than in many parts of the world.
And is there a geographic area or country that is further ahead in delivering social betterment, where the government collaborates tightly with the private sector and the non-profit sector, driving change in society.
Yeah, so I've been on this journey for many years. I worked a lot in Scandinavia, in Denmark, Sweden, Norway. So I think that the Scandinavian countries are more ahead in the kind of cooperation around all the actors in society. The Netherlands, where I live, also quite active. There's a long history of working together with the trade unions, with the NGOs.
Yeah.
We have this consensus model. So I say it. Answer to your question, and also actually Sweden is the country that wants to become the #1 in implementing the SDGs, and Denmark is the second country that wants to be the best in the SDGs. So we see that the Scandinavians are ahead in that. And I think what I've been reading about France, even President Macron has been looking at the Danish model, and it's a model which is very interesting because it's very entrepreneurial. At the same time, there's a lot of welfare benefits. So the welfare state is still very active, whilst there is more innovation entrepreneurship.
And what about, according to you, the future of social innovation in Europe now?
So social innovation, because I also am chairman of the Worldwide Social Innovation Exchange, so it's slightly different than B Corps. So if that is your question.
This is your vision, a global vision about social innovation in Europe for you.
Well, it's a big question. I mean, I give you one or two, senses of direction. The most important one is the shift away. Well, we need to go much more bottom up. People have to be much more engaged, which is why I think what's happening in London now with this Extinction Rebellion is very good, because people are becoming more open and engaged in making these decisions. So one is participation. The second is we have a lot of very old political partners in Europe. Some of it is hopeless. So we want to have new political energy. So there is one group called VOLT, VOLT, is a new European party, only for young MEPs, like people in their 20s and 30s. They have this kind of agenda: sustainability, social entrepreneurship, diversity, etc., etc. So more bottom up, more diversity, more women, more younger people. I mean, all the things that we need to do to have social innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
Social innovation, there is actually, by the way, there was an article published this morning by Umar Haq, who's an amazing guy, and he says that the three problems we have is patriarchism, autocracy, and inequality. I mean, and also climate change. So we need to shake up the system. Disruption in a kind of general sense.
Thank you, Marcello. So now we have nearly 10 minutes for the question from you, for Marcello. So if you have any question, please hands up, and we will give you a microphone. Mélanie.
Thank you. Allô?
Il faudra allumer le micro. Est-ce qu'on lui a allumé? No, it's better for everybody.
1, 2. Yeah. Hello. I have a question. I am today managing a family company in a quality engineering industry, and we are very interested about B Corp. And we would be happy to start our journey to B Corp. I would like. What would be your first advices for me to start this journey?
Okay, so two things is, one, there is an active community of B Corps in France. Are you in France? Yeah. So one is to kind of get to plug in the community. We have a stand out there, B Corp stand. You can meet lots of people who already have done the journey, so they know what they're thinking behind. There's a philosophy. So the philosophy of B Corp is, how do you create this positive impact whilst, of course, being a successful company. So this is what I say, profit and impact. So one is to get to know the community in the stand. The second is basically, hey, come to me, behind you there is Katie, who is running BLab Europe, and say, hey, and we will help you to get going. But it's a journey of learning, and it's a journey of, it's interesting. For me, it's like doing a medical. When you do medical, you do a medical of your company, and then you see where the things you're really good at and the things where you can improve. And then you can work in the community to learn how to improve the things where you would like to improve. So that's what it is. It's basically a learning journey to become a better company. So welcome.
Clear. Thank you.
So as you see, many French people are committed.
Well, I mean, France, you've been here this morning. 3 years ago, I met Emmanuel Faber, and he said Danone, which I already knew. Danone was already a company with that kind of DNA. So Danone has been very helpful, and we have a lot of very, progressive, iconic companies in France. And France, for me as a European, France is the country that, with the liberté, égalité, fraternité, and entrepreneurship is the best kind of mix. So there is a lot that could come from France.
Hello. You talked about something that sparkled my interest about engaging people, going from a top-down approach to a bottom-up approach, and this is something that a lot of companies are struggling with. How do you go from autocracy to something that is much more horizontal? What would be your first steps and first advice for companies who would want to do this?
So, thank you. I think we need to do this bottom-up approach throughout society, not just in companies. And that's also partly one of the issues of our political system, that he has not been inclusive enough. But talking about companies, 3, 4, 5 years ago, Frédéric Laloux wrote this book about reinventing organizations. Before him, there was Ricardo Semler from Brazil that talked about totally open companies. So we have models of companies, we have examples of companies that have done this. So the first thing is to go and see what the best examples are. Where are the companies that have already done it? And there is a big movement of this reinventing organization. There are many consultants working on this model. Generally also, to make a connection with B Corps, I would say about half the B Corps are young, new companies, started by young people. And this is also, by the way, one of the things that Emmanuel Faber told me 3 years ago is we want to be with the new, because Danone is 100 years old and they want to be part of a community, a tribe of young companies. So many of these young companies in the B Corp, they are run like this. They are very kind of flat and very little kind of, hierarchy, et cetera, et cetera. And then deep down, there are a lot of studies now, of course, that show that there is a real correlation between engagement, participation, and also performance. So it's, of course, good in itself to have people engaged, and so that everyone has a voice, as it were. But secondly, it's also very good for business if you do it in the right way. So I think the only reason why we're not doing enough because we have a lot of companies that are too conservative and too kind of old-fashioned. But I lived for 2 years in Silicon Valley, and I mean, Silicon Valley is not. There are lots of things that are not going well, but what is going well is at a very young place. A lot of young people. It's generally a very hierarchical place, and Europe is a little bit far behind. We should wake up a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you. There is another question from the young girl.
Hello, we are the youth activators. We're here to give some the perception of the young people of today. So we are very interested in the B Corp label. And with my team, with Florent and Clémence, we have questions. Why and what for do you engage yourself with B Corp? I don't know if it's clear. Yeah. Why and what for do you do what you do?
Okay, so
what's your purpose, the meaning of your life when you wake up each morning, Marcello?
So I have a lot of passion for this because I've been on this journey for 30 years. So basically, my own story, not my story, but my essence. My essence is that I am an entrepreneur. I started as an entrepreneur in a family business. I think the creativity, the innovation that comes from entrepreneurship is. It's the biggest thing we have. This is human creativity. So how do we use the human creativity for the good of society, for the good of the planet? And that's what B Corp is doing. B Corp is saying there is a way, or there are many ways, combine and integrate the needs to be sustainably financially, a company has to be financially sustainable with all the other positive dimensions, whether it's human development, of course, the environment and the social issues. So how do you run a kind of a humanistic, responsible company that meets the needs that we know we have? And it is not so easy. I mean, this morning we were only touching the surface. But the fact is that we are consuming too much. We should be maybe consuming half of what we consume in the world. And certainly people like us and all the richer countries in the world, we need to change our consumption pattern. So that's going to affect some of the companies. But as a system, we need to do that. So the B Corp purpose is entrepreneurship, innovation, creativity, fantastic. But how do we use them for the good of the world? Not just to enrich someone, or we use going away from the for-profit, profit above everything, to an integrated set of goals that have these issues. So it's very optimistic. It's optimistic in the sense that we also know with the SDGs we have to find 10 trillion a year to invest. So we also have invest. There's opportunities for business. This is not just about doing less harm. It's also about a lot of good renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, a different kind of architecture, mobility. All these sectors, they need to change the next 10, 20 years. So it's an amazing opportunity, certainly for younger people. This is the future, If you want to be in business in the future, you have to do this. There is no other way, So Faber said this morning, you either be bold or be dead. So that's the reality.
Okay, last question for the... We only have 2 minutes, so okay. You're waiting for the microphone. It will be better.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you. I'm David Applefield. I have a question because you mentioned that Europe needs to catch up. You also said that we're consuming too much. You also said that Silicon Valley represented some positive forces, but the rest of America is not exactly in the same place. And when you talk about some of the goals that we're trying to achieve here, we get a response from voters and I know this quite well because I'm running for U.S. Congress in New Jersey in the 2020 elections, and the response is always, yeah, that sounds great, but who's going to pay for it? And they just feel as if this is going to be more cost and harder on business. And we have a paradox because there's so much pushback on things that ultimately we know that there's a business argument, but to get over that hurdle and convince people to do the right things, business people who are so locked into the consumer chain as it is. What is your advice for helping politicians who see the light convince both the public and the business community locally when you're not in Silicon Valley or at Sustainable Brands?
Well, thank you. I think that a lot of the changes are happening at the local level, city level, regional level. So even in the U.S., Vermont, Massachusetts, California, different than Texas. So it's diverse. And the responses are also, the responses of citizens and companies are also diverse. So there are pockets in the U.S. that are very progressive. And likewise in other parts of the world, either UK or Italy or the moving forward. There was a book a couple of years ago said the title was "When Mayors Ran the World." So there was about actually giving more powers to city mayors, to regions, and I think that we within the B Corp movement, Katie Hill, who is here, she's been leading a movement called Scotland Can Be, using Scotland as a region that would actually use the sort of impact measurement that we use for B Corps for her whole region. So my long answer to your question is, it's about people who are progressive in certain parts of the world where you live in. So, you go find those people. You must obviously be one of those persons, but it's, create your own network of people who can also change makers. And that's, in a way, the only way to go. There's no other way. The question is, how do you scale up? But if you are in New Jersey, maybe there's enough people there that you can motivate. And then the final point is, this is where I'm really say I'm fortunate to be European. Europe, with the EU, of course lots of problems with the EU, but still, we've really created something amazing. All these countries working together now for the last 60 years. So it's a very valuable model. It costs money, it takes time, it's bureaucratic, but still it's much better than fighting with each other, which is what we used to do, or competing too much. So maybe there is an inspiration for other parts of the world of collectively working, which is what the EU does. They collectively work on some of these issues.
Thank you so much, Marcello. It was
you.
our last question.